For some folks, and it's a very small group, you may be entitled to an enhancement in the Stryker settlement program for wage loss. It's a very complicated situation, so it bears discussing so that some folks can get a better understanding of whether they may or may not qualify for an enhancement in the settlement program for wage loss. Since January of 2013, Stryker's had a program in place through a company called Broadspire to reimburse patients who undergo revision surgery for wage loss. I don't want to get into whether the payments were adequate or whether they were timely or whether they paid for the right amount of time or paid at a rate that was right. Let's leave that aside for right now. Theoretically, Broadspire was supposed to pay for people's short-term wage loss. And that was true all the way from January of 2013 up until the time the settlement was announced. Broadspire was never intended to pay long-term wage loss for those people who were significantly affected by the failure of the Stryker Rejuvenate or ABG2 device. In the settlement program, there is wage loss available to those people who were more significantly affected from a wage loss standpoint than, say, the 6 to 8 weeks after revision surgery, or even 10 weeks after revision surgery. Because of the revision surgery and complications associated with the revision surgery, infections, dislocations, re-revisions, heart attacks, strokes, DVTs, the patient was out of work for a long time. We actually have some people that they've lost their jobs because of the failure of their hips. We have people that have lost their careers because of the failure of the hips. Those are the folks that were contemplated as being appropriate for wage loss enhancements in the settlement program, not Broadspire, in the settlement program. Starting in June of this year, we will be able to make wage loss applications in the settlement program as an enhancement for a small group of people. If you're one of my clients and you're watching this, you've already received communication from us with regard to exactly what we are contemplating in terms of wage loss filing for you. The computation for whether you qualify for a wage loss in the Stryker settlement program is a little bit complicated. But once you see how it works, it's really not that complicated. There's a threshold amount. You must lose more than the threshold amount to qualify for a wage loss enhancement. And what is that threshold? Well, it depends on you. It depends on how much you make. It's an individually tailored threshold to each person. How is it measured? Well, what you do is, if you had your Stryker Rejuvenate put in 2010, you would go back and look at your 2009 and 2008 earnings, the 2 years prior to when you had the hip put in. You add them together. So if you made $25,000 in 08, $25,000 in 09, the total would be $50,000. In order to qualify for a wage loss enhancement in the Stryker settlement program, you must have lost more than 20% of that $50,000. So in this case, for this plaintiff, it would be $10,000. So now fast forward to when you start having problems with your hip. If it was put in 2010, let's say it's 2012, and the hip's gone bad, and you have your revision surgery, and you're out of work, for a certain period of time, you look at how much wages you lost, and if it doesn't add up to $10,000, then you don't qualify for a wage loss enhancement in the Stryker settlement program. You can change those numbers any way you want. If the person made 50 and 50, it's 100. Now you must have lost $20,000 to qualify for a wage loss enhancement. If it's 100 and 100, that's 200. Now you have to have lost $40,000 to qualify for a wage loss enhancement. For our clients right now, we've already communicated with you. I'm sure everybody has been looking at their wages, what they made in these years, how much they lost, to see if they qualify for a wage loss enhancement. The other side, or the flip side of that coin, is the most you can get as a wage loss enhancement in the Stryker settlement program is $200,000 of lost wages. So you've got a threshold on this end and a cap on this end. The most you can get is 200, but you have to have lost at least 20% of the aggregate of the 2 years before the hip was placed in order to qualify.